Billionaire CEO struggled with fatherhood in a broken family dynamic. I have a daughter I've never met. These 7 words shattered Alexander Reed's world as he stared at the photograph on his screen. A 12-year-old girl with his distinctive gray-blue eyes and the cleft chin that had been passed down through generations of Reed men. His hands trembled as the truth crashed over him like a tidal wave. "Olivia," he whispered, the name foreign yet somehow sacred on his lips. "Have you ever discovered that your definition of success was completely wrong? That the empire you built, the wealth you accumulated, the power you wielded, all of it meaningless compared to what you lost along the way?" Alexander Reed stood at the precipice of this devastating realization. The billionaire CEO who commanded boardrooms with unwavering confidence now faced the consequences of the choice he made 12 years ago. When he walked away from Eleanor Westridge, he hadn't just abandoned a relationship, he'd abandoned a child. His child. "Tell Miss Westridge I need to see her today," Alexander instructed his assistant, his voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside him. "It's urgent." Hours later, he would stand face to face with Eleanor for the first time in over a decade, the tension between them thick enough to cut with a knife. "How did you find out?" Eleanor asked, her voice carefully controlled. "She has my eyes, Eleanor," Alexander replied, emotion making his voice rough. "My chin." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "You made your choice very clear, Alexander. Your company was your priority, your only priority." Could Alexander rebuild what he destroyed? Would his daughter ever call him dad and mean it? Or was it too late to become the father he should have been? If you've ever chosen work over someone who loved you, don't just scroll past this. Hit subscribe now, because sometimes you don't get the chance to fix it. Most people only realize that when it's too late. The morning Alexander Reed stepped into his corner office on the 87th floor of Pinnacle Tower, he felt the familiar hollowness that had become his constant companion. The panoramic view of the city sprawled before him, a testament to his success, a monument to his ambition, yet it failed to fill the void that had been growing inside him for years. At 45, Alexander had amassed a fortune that placed him among the world's elite. His technology conglomerate, Horizon Innovations, had revolutionized renewable energy storage, making him not just wealthy but influential on a global scale. Business magazines called him visionary. Financial analysts tracked his every move, yet as he stood at the window, watching the city wake beneath him, he felt nothing but the weight of his solitude. The morning light cast long shadows across his minimalist office. Everything in the space spoke of power and precision. The custom mahogany desk, the original artwork on the walls, the awards displayed in a glass cabinet. Nothing spoke of connection or warmth. Nothing spoke of home. "Mr. Reed, the board is assembled in the conference room," his executive assistant, Vanessa, announced from the doorway. Alexander nodded, straightening his custom-tailored suit. "Thank you. I'll be there momentarily." He took one last look at the city below, his city in many ways, before turning away from the window. His morning routine never varied. Wake at 5 a.m., exercise with his personal trainer, breakfast while reviewing international market reports, arrive at the office by 7:30. The discipline that had built his empire now felt like a prison of his own making. The quarterly board meeting proceeded as expected, reports of record profits, expansion plans for the Asian market, projections that exceeded even the most optimistic forecasts. Alexander moved through his presentation with practiced precision, fielding questions with the confidence that had become his trademark. "Our clean energy division has exceeded projections by 17%, Alexander explained, gesturing to the chart displayed on the wall-size screen. "The new battery technology is performing beyond expectations in field tests." The board members nodded appreciatively, some making notes, others simply watching with expressions of satisfaction. These were the moments Alexander had once lived for, the validation, the sense of achievement, the knowledge that his vision was changing the world. So why did it all feel so empty now? "And what about the Westridge acquisition?" asked Gregory Winters, the oldest board member and the only one who had known Alexander since the company's inception. "Any progress on that front?" Alexander's expression remained neutral, though the name sent a jolt through him that he hoped wasn't visible. "We're still in preliminary discussions. Their CEO is resistant, but their board is interested. I'm having dinner with Eleanor Westridge tonight to discuss terms." What Alexander didn't mention was that Eleanor Westridge was more than just a business rival. She was the woman he'd walked away from 12 years ago, when Horizon was still a struggling startup, and he couldn't imagine dividing his focus between building his empire and building a life with her. The meeting adjourned, and Alexander retreated to his office, instructing Vanessa to hold his calls. He needed to prepare for tonight's dinner, a meeting that had taken months to arrange, and that Eleanor had only agreed to after her company's stock had taken a significant hit following a failed product launch. As he settled behind his desk, memories of Eleanor surfaced unbidden. Her brilliant mind, her infectious laugh, The way she challenged him when everyone else deferred to him. They had met at a tech conference where they were both speakers, she representing her family's established technology firm, he the hungry upstart with revolutionary ideas but limited resources. Their connection had been immediate and intense. For nearly 2 years, they had been inseparable, their relationship flourishing despite the growing demands of Alexander's fledgling company. But as Horizon began to gain traction, as investors showed interest and opportunities multiplied, Alexander had made a choice that he had justified to himself countless times over the years. "I can't divide my focus right now, Eleanor," he had told her during their final argument. "The company needs everything I have. We're at a critical juncture." "And what about us?" Eleanor had asked, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Aren't we at a critical juncture too?" "This is temporary," he had insisted. "Once the company is established, once we're stable, there will always be another critical juncture, Alexander, another reason to put us second." She had been right, of course. There had always been another milestone to reach, another challenge to overcome, another expansion to manage. The temporary separation had become permanent, and Alexander had convinced himself it was for the best. That Eleanor deserved someone who could put her first. That he wasn't cut out for balancing a relationship with the demands of building a global enterprise. People think success feels like peace, but what if it just feels like silence? If that line hits you, subscribe. If it doesn't, maybe one day it will, and you'll wish you had. As he reviewed the acquisition proposal, his phone buzzed with a news alert. Habitually, he glanced at the screen, expecting another market update or industry announcement. Instead, the headline made his blood run cold. Westridge Technologies CEO Eleanor Westridge announces retirement, cites family commitments as daughter prepares for college. Alexander stared at the screen, the words blurring before his eyes. Daughter. Eleanor had a daughter. The timing couldn't be coincidental, a child who would now be around 11 or 12 years old. A child conceived around the time he and Eleanor had been together. With trembling fingers, he searched for more information, finding a recent interview where Eleanor mentioned her daughter, Olivia, who was preparing for entrance exams to prestigious boarding school. The article included a photo, a smiling preteen, with Alexander's distinctive gray-blue eyes, and the cleft chin that had been passed down through generations of Reed men. The room seemed to tilt around him. He had a daughter. A daughter he had never known about, who was growing up without him, who might not even know he existed. His intercom buzzed, Vanessa's voice cutting through his shock. "Mr. Reed, Miss Westridge's office called. She's canceling dinner tonight due to a personal matter. They've asked to reschedule for next week." Alexander took a deep breath, steadying himself. "No," he said firmly. "Tell them I understand, but I need to see her today. It's urgent. I'll come to her." "Sir?" Vanessa's confusion was evident. "Cancel my appointments for the rest of the day. And have the car brought around." Alexander moved through the next hour in a daze. He barely registered the concerned looks from his executive team as he abruptly left the building, or the questions from his driver about their unexpected destination. His mind was consumed with a photograph of Olivia, with calculations about her age, with questions about why Eleanor had never told him. 40 minutes later, Alexander stood in the lobby of the Westridge Technologies headquarters, a building significantly more modest than his own gleaming skyscraper. The receptionist eyed him warily. "Miss Westridge isn't taking unscheduled visitors today, Mr. Reed." "Tell her it's about Olivia," Alexander said quietly, watching the receptionist's eyes widen slightly before she picked up the phone. The wait was brief. Eleanor appeared in the lobby minutes later. Her expression, a careful mask of professional courtesy that did nothing to hide the wariness in her eyes. She was still beautiful, more so than he remembered with silver, now threading through her dark hair and fine lines at the corners of her eyes that spoke of both laughter and worry. "Alexander," she said coolly, "this is unexpected." "We need to talk, Eleanor. Not about business." She studied him for a long moment before nodding. "My office." The elevator ride was silent, tension crackling between them like static electricity. Eleanor's office was warm and personal, with framed photographs on her desk, several featuring a smiling, dark-haired girl at various ages. Alexander's heart constricted at the sight. Eleanor closed the door behind them. "How did you find out?" No pretense, no denial. Just the direct approach he had always admired in it. "A news alert about your retirement mentioned your daughter preparing for school, the timing, and then I saw her photo." Alexander's voice was rough with emotion. "She has my eyes, Eleanor. My chin." Eleanor sank into her chair, suddenly looking tired. "I was going to tell you. After the acquisition talks concluded, I didn't want you to think I was using her as leverage." 12 years, Alexander said, the words barely audible. "She's been alive for 12 years, and I never knew." "You made your choice very clear, Alexander." Eleanor's voice hardened. "Your company was your priority, your only priority. You told me you couldn't divide your focus, that you weren't ready for a family. When I found out I was pregnant, you had already made it abundantly clear where I stood in your list of priorities. You should have told me anyway, he insisted, anger flaring. I had a right to know. And what would you have done? Eleanor challenged. Offered financial support while continuing to build your empire? Scheduled occasional visits between board meetings and investor calls? Olivia deserved better than to be an afterthought in your busy life. The truth of her words hit him like a physical blow. He sank into the chair across from her desk, the fight draining out of him. Does she know about me? Eleanor's expression softened slightly. She knows her father is a businessman who wasn't ready for a family. I've never spoken ill of you, Alexander. I promised myself I wouldn't poison her against you, regardless of how I felt. I want to meet her, Alexander said, the words emerging before he could consider them fully. Eleanor shook her head. It's not that simple. Olivia is at a vulnerable age. She's dealing with school pressures, preparing for entrance exams. Introducing you now, out of nowhere. She's my daughter, Eleanor, Alexander interrupted, his voice breaking. I've already missed 12 years. I don't want to miss any more. Eleanor studied him, her expression unreadable. Why now, Alexander? Is it just because you discovered her existence, or has something changed in you? Because if you're still the same man who walked away 12 years ago, the man who puts business above everything else, then meeting Olivia would only hurt her when you inevitably retreat back into your work. The question struck at the heart of Alexander's recent discontent, the emptiness he'd been feeling, the growing awareness that his success had come at a terrible cost. I'm not the same man, he said quietly. I've achieved everything I set out to accomplish professionally, and I've discovered it means nothing without someone to share it with. I've been reevaluating my priorities. Eleanor's skepticism was evident. Convenient timing. I'm not asking to disrupt her life, Alexander said. I'm not expecting to suddenly become dad. I want to know her, and I want her to have the opportunity to know me if she's interested. Eleanor was silent for a long moment, considering. Finally, she sighed. I'll think about it. But I need to talk to Olivia first. This has to be her decision, Alexander. I won't force this on her. Of course, he agreed quickly. Whatever makes her comfortable. As he stood to leave, Eleanor called after him. Alexander, the acquisition is off the table, he finished for her. I won't use business to pressure you about Olivia. Whatever happens between our companies happens independently of this. The surprise in Eleanor's eyes was quickly masked, but not before Alexander caught it. He'd changed more than she realized. Would you forgive him if you were Eleanor? Tell me below. And if you believe everyone deserves a second chance, prove it. Subscribe. The ones who don't. I'll be in the comments explaining why forgiveness scares them. The next 2 weeks were the longest of Alexander's life. He threw himself into research, reading everything he could find about parenting preteens, about building relationships with estranged children, about the psychological impact of absent fathers. He cleared his schedule, delegating responsibilities to his executive team in a way he never had before, ignoring their confused looks and concerned questions. Sir, the Tokyo investors are expecting you personally at next week's summit, his CFO reminded him during a hastily called meeting. You'll handle it, James, Alexander replied, not looking up from the article he was reading about communicating with adolescents. You know the projections better than I do. But they specifically requested. Then unrequest it, Alexander interrupted, finally meeting the man's gaze. Family emergency, indefinite duration. The words felt strange on his tongue. Family. For so long, Horizon had been his only family. Now, the possibility of connecting with his daughter consumed his thoughts. Making board meetings and investment strategies seemed trivial in comparison. He found himself wandering through department stores, looking at things a 12-year-old girl might like, before remembering Eleanor's warning about elaborate gestures. Instead, he focused on learning about Olivia through public information, her school's robotics team that had won regional championships, the science fair where her project on sustainable energy had taken first place. The irony wasn't lost on him that his daughter shared his passion for the very field that had made him his fortune. When Eleanor finally called, Alexander was in the middle of a meeting with international investors. He excused himself immediately, heart pounding as he took the call in his private office. She wants to meet you, Eleanor said without preamble, but she has conditions. Anything, Alexander replied instantly. First, it needs to be casual, no elaborate gestures, no expensive gifts. Second, I'll be present the entire time. And third, this isn't a one-time meeting for you to satisfy your curiosity. If you start this, you need to be committed to building a relationship at whatever pace Olivia is comfortable with. I understand, Alexander said solemnly. I agree to all her terms. They arranged to meet that weekend at a small cafe near Eleanor's home, neutral territory, where Olivia would feel safe. Alexander arrived 30 minutes early, too nervous to sit, pacing outside, until he spotted them approaching Eleanor, and a tall, slender girl with dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail, wearing jeans and a science-themed t-shirt. Alexander's heart seemed to stop. She was real, his daughter, walking toward him, looking simultaneously like a stranger and like the most familiar person he'd ever seen. Eleanor made the introductions, her voice gentle. "Olivia, this is Alexander Reed." "Hello," Olivia said, her voice steady, despite the wariness in her eyes, his eyes, looking back at him with an intelligence that took his breath away. "Hello, Olivia," Alexander managed, fighting to keep his voice even. It's very nice to meet you." They settled at a table, the conversation awkward at first. Alexander had rehearsed what he might say, but all his prepared remarks fled in the face of this remarkable young person studying him with such careful consideration. "Mom says you build things that help store solar energy," Olivia said finally, breaking a silence that had stretched too long. Alexander nodded, grateful for the opening. "That's right. My company develops battery technology that makes renewable energy more practical for everyday use. I did a science project on solar panels last year," Olivia offered. "I got an A." "That doesn't surprise me at all," Alexander said, smiling genuinely for what felt like the first time in years. "Your mother was always brilliant with scientific concepts." "She says I get my analytical thinking from you," Olivia said, watching his reaction carefully. Alexander glanced at Eleanor, surprised and touched that she had attributed any of Olivia's positive qualities to him. Eleanor gave a small shrug, the ghost of a smile touching her lips. "If that's true, then you've been doubly blessed," Alexander said. "Your mother's brilliance and my stubbornness, a powerful combination." Olivia's serious expression cracked slightly, a hint of a smile appearing. "Mom definitely says I got your stubbornness." The ice broken, conversation flowed more easily. Olivia spoke about school, about her interest in robotics, about the boarding school she was considering. Alexander listened intently, asking questions that showed he was genuinely interested, not just going through the motions. "Our team built a robot that can navigate obstacle courses autonomously," Olivia explained, her eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "I wrote most of the code for the navigation system." "That's impressive," Alexander said, genuinely amazed. "I didn't start coding until college." "Mom got me started when I was 8, Olivia replied. "She said it was like learning another language, and the earlier you start, the better." Alexander looked at Eleanor with newfound appreciation. She had given their daughter opportunities and encouragement that went far beyond what most parents could provide. When Olivia excused herself to use the restroom, Eleanor leaned forward. "You're doing well," she said quietly. "She's been preparing for this meeting for days, reading articles about you, watching videos of your speeches," and Alexander's throat tightened with emotion. "She's incredible, Eleanor. You've done an amazing job raising her." "It hasn't always been easy," Eleanor admitted, "especially in the beginning, trying to run a company and be a single parent." "I should have been there," Alexander said, regret washing over him. "I'm so sorry I wasn't." Eleanor's expression softened. "We can't change the past, Alexander, but Olivia's future is still unfolding." When Olivia returned, she seemed more relaxed, asking Alexander direct questions about his work, his life, his interests outside of business, a question that momentarily stumped him, making him realize how little time he devoted to anything beyond Horizon. "Do you have any hobbies?" Olivia asked, stirring her hot chocolate. Alexander hesitated. "I swim and read when I can find the time." "What do you read?" Another pause. When had he last read something that wasn't a business report or industry analysis? Biographies, mostly, of innovators and scientists? Olivia nodded, seeming to file this information away. "I like science fiction and books about space exploration." "I used to love science fiction," Alexander admitted, remembering the dog-eared paperbacks that had filled his college dorm room. "Asimov was my favorite. I just finished the Foundation series." Olivia's face lit up with genuine excitement for the first time since they'd met. As their meeting drew to a close, Olivia hesitated, then asked the question Alexander had been dreading, "Why didn't you want to be my dad?" The directness of it, the vulnerability beneath the carefully controlled expression, nearly undid him. Alexander took a deep breath, knowing that his answer mattered more than perhaps anything he'd ever said. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said simply. "I thought success meant building a company, achieving financial security, making a mark on the world. I was wrong. Real success would have been being there for you and your mother. I can't change that mistake, but I hope you'll give me the chance to be part of your life now in whatever way you're comfortable with." Olivia studied him, her expression thoughtful. "I have a robotics competition next weekend," she said finally. "You could come if you want." Alexander felt a surge of hope so powerful it nearly overwhelmed him. "I would be honored," he said, his voice rough with emotion. As they parted ways, Olivia surprised him with a quick, awkward hug that lasted barely a second but felt like a miracle. Alexander watched them walk away, Eleanor's arm around their daughter's shoulders, and made a silent promise to himself and to them. He would not waste this second chance. That moment, the hug he almost never got, happens once in a lifetime. If you still have someone you can reach out to, subscribe before you forget how lucky you are. The ones who wait, they always regret it. The following Saturday, Alexander arrived at the high school gymnasium where the robotics competition was being held. The space buzzed with energy. Teams of students huddled around their creations, parents chatting in the bleachers, judges conferring at tables covered with laptops and scoring sheets. Alexander spotted Eleanor in the crowd and made his way toward her, feeling oddly out of place in his casual clothes. He had deliberately dressed down, jeans and a button-down shirt instead of his usual tailored suit, but he still felt conspicuous, as if everyone could tell he didn't belong in this world of normal parental activities. "You made it," Eleanor said, making room for him on the bleacher. "I wouldn't miss it," Alexander replied, scanning the busy floor for Olivia. "How's she doing? Is she nervous?" Always before competitions. But she's in her element. Eleanor pointed toward a group of students in matching blue t-shirts. That's her team. Olivia's the one checking the code one last time. Alexander followed her gaze and saw his daughter, brow furrowed in concentration as she typed rapidly on a laptop connected to a robot that looked like a sophisticated remote-controlled car with a mechanical arm attached. The intensity of her focus, the slight tilt of her head as she worked through a problem, he recognized himself in those small gestures. "She's just like you when you're working on something important," Eleanor said softly, as if reading his thoughts. Before Alexander could respond, an announcement came over the loudspeaker that the competition was about to begin. He watched, heart swelling with pride, as Olivia's team navigated their robot through a complex obstacle course, picking up and placing objects with precision. When they finished with the fastest time in their division, Alexander found himself on his feet, cheering as loudly as any of the other parents. Olivia looked up at the sound, her eyes finding his in the crowd. She gave a small, surprised smile before being engulfed in congratulatory hugs from her teammates. After the award ceremony, Olivia's team took second place overall. She made her way to where Alexander and Eleanor waited. "You were amazing," Alexander said, resisting the urge to hug her, unsure if she would welcome the gesture. "Thanks for coming," Olivia replied, a hint of shyness in her voice. "Did you really think it was good?" "Good? It was extraordinary. The way your robot navigated that final obstacle, the programming must have been incredibly complex." Olivia's face lit up at the specific praise. "I wrote a special subroutine for detecting irregular shapes. It's still not perfect, but that's why we lost first place," interrupted a boy who had appeared at Olivia's side. The arm calibration was off by 2 millimeters. "Mom, Alexander, this is Ethan, our team captain," Olivia introduced. "Nice to meet you, mister." Ethan trailed off, looking confused. "Reed," Alexander supplied. "Alexander Reed." The boy's eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, Horizon Innovations, Alexander Reed? The battery technology guy?" Alexander nodded, uncomfortable with the attention. "Whoa," Ethan turned to Olivia. "You didn't say your dad was that Alexander Reed." "He's not," Olivia began, then stopped, glancing uncertainly at Alexander. "I mean, we're just getting to know each other." The moment hung awkwardly until Eleanor smoothly intervened. "We were thinking of celebrating with pizza, Ethan. Would you like to join us?" As they left the gymnasium, Alexander felt a tentative touch on his arm. Olivia was looking up at him, her expression apologetic. "Sorry about that, with Ethan, I mean." "You have nothing to apologize for," Alexander assured her. "This is all new. We're figuring it out as we go." Olivia nodded, relief evident in her face. "So, do you really know about robotics, or were you just being nice?" Alexander smiled. "My first patent was for a robotic arm designed to handle hazardous materials. I'd be happy to show you the design sometime, if you're interested." "Really?" Olivia's eyes lit up. "That would be awesome." In the months that followed, Alexander restructured his entire life around building a relationship with Olivia. He attended her robotics competitions, helped her prepare for school interviews, and gradually became a regular presence in her life. Eleanor watched this transformation with cautious optimism, her initial skepticism slowly giving way to a tentative trust. The business world noticed the change in Alexander Reed. He delegated more, worked fewer weekends, and spoke in interviews about the importance of work-life balance, a concept he would have dismissed as weakness just a year earlier. Speculation ran rampant when he was photographed at Olivia's school events, the press eventually discovering the existence of his previously unknown daughter. "Mr. Reed, is it true you have a 12-year-old daughter you've only recently acknowledged?" A reporter called out as Alexander left a technology conference. "I have a daughter I'm incredibly proud of," Alexander replied calmly. "The circumstances of our relationship are private, and I ask that you respect her privacy." But the questions persisted, forcing Alexander to issue a brief statement through Horizon's public relations department. "I missed 12 years of my daughter's life because I prioritized work above all else. I don't intend to make that mistake again. I ask for privacy as our family navigates this personal journey." The statement only fueled more speculation, but Alexander found he cared less about public opinion than he ever had before. What mattered was the growing bond with Olivia, the way she had begun to call him when she had questions about science or technology, the tentative trust developing between them. One evening, as Alexander helped Olivia with a particularly challenging coding problem in the study of Eleanor's home, he noticed his daughter watching him with a thoughtful expression. "What is it?" he asked, setting aside the laptop. "Why did you and Mom break up?" Olivia asked directly. "The real reason." Alexander glanced toward the doorway, but Eleanor was in the kitchen, out of earshot. He turned back to Olivia, knowing she deserved honesty. "I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid I couldn't be the kind of partner your mother deserved while also building my company. Afraid of failing at both. So I chose the thing that seemed more controllable, my work." "But you were successful," Olivia pointed out. "Horizon is huge now." "Yes, but success feels empty when you have no one to share it with," Alexander said quietly. "I built an empire and came home to an empty penthouse every night. That's not success, it's just achievement." Olivia considered this. "Do you still love her? Mom, I mean?" The question caught Alexander off guard. "Your mother is an extraordinary woman," he said carefully. "I've always admired and respected her." "That's not what I asked." Alexander smiled ruefully. "You really did inherit my directness, didn't you?" He sighed. "The truth is, I never stopped loving your mother, but I lost the right to tell her that a long time ago." "Maybe you should tell her anyway," Olivia suggested. "She gets lonely sometimes, even though she thinks I don't notice." Before Alexander could respond, Eleanor appeared in the doorway. "Dinner's ready, you two. Olivia, go wash up." As Olivia left the room, Eleanor raised an eyebrow at Alexander. "Serious conversation?" She was asking about coding variables. Alexander lied smoothly, not wanting to betray Olivia's confidence. Eleanor didn't look convinced, but didn't press the issue. As they walked to the dining room together, Alexander found himself studying her profile, wondering if what Olivia had said was true. Did Eleanor get lonely? Had she dated in the years since their separation? The thought of her with someone else sent an unexpected pang through him. Do you think Alexander and Eleanor can find love again? Comment your truth. But if you've ever watched two people try to heal what the world broke, subscribe. Because if you leave now, you'll never know if redemption wins. As Olivia's boarding school decision loomed, Alexander found himself in Eleanor's living room one evening after Olivia had gone to bed, discussing the options. "Westridge Academy has the best science program," Eleanor said, reviewing the brochures spread across the coffee table. "But it's 3 hours away. Lakeside is closer," Alexander pointed out. "Their robotics team is nationally ranked." Eleanor looked up at him, a small smile playing at her lips. "Listen to us, co-parenting, like we've been doing it for years." Alexander met her gaze. "Better late than never?" "Much better," she agreed softly. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibility. Alexander had been careful to focus solely on building his relationship with Olivia, not wanting to complicate matters by revisiting his feelings for Eleanor. But those feelings had never truly disappeared. They had simply been buried beneath ambition and regret. "Eleanor," he began hesitantly, "I know I have no right to ask this, but is there any chance that you and I—" "Alexander," she interrupted gently, "we've come a long way in rebuilding trust for Olivia's sake. Let's not rush anything else." He nodded, accepting her wisdom. "You're right, as always." But the conversation had shifted something between them, acknowledging the elephant in the room. In the weeks that followed, Alexander noticed subtle changes in their interactions, lingering glances, the occasional brush of hands as they passed documents back and forth, conversations that extended long after Olivia had gone to bed. They took Olivia on campus visits together, presenting a united front as they toured potential schools. At Lakeside Academy, the admissions director assumed they were still married, referring to them as Mr. and Mrs. Reed throughout the tour. Neither corrected her. "Did you notice she thought we were married?" Eleanor asked as they drove home, Olivia asleep in the back seat. "I noticed," Alexander replied, keeping his eyes on the road. "Did it bother you?" Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "No," she finally said. "It didn't." The night before Olivia was to leave for Lakeside Academy, her final choice, made after careful consideration and multiple campus visits with both parents, Alexander hosted a small dinner at his penthouse. He had redesigned one of the spare bedrooms specifically for Olivia, filling it with books, a state-of-the-art computer for video calls, and a telescope positioned to take advantage of the unobstructed view of the night sky. "This is amazing," Olivia breathed as she explored the room. "I can see the whole city from here." "I thought you might like to have your own space when you visit on weekends," Alexander explained. "If you want to, that is." "Of course I want to," Olivia said, as if it were obvious. She hesitated, then added, "It's weird, you know. 6 months ago, I didn't even know you. Now I can't imagine you not being in my life." Alexander's throat tightened with emotion. "That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Olivia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. "You need to get out more." After dinner, as Eleanor helped Olivia double-check her packing list in the new bedroom, Alexander stood on his balcony, looking out at the city lights. The view was the same one he'd stared at countless times before, feeling empty despite his success. Now, with the sound of his daughter's laughter drifting through the open door, the view seemed different, brighter, more meaningful. Eleanor joined him on the balcony, wrapping her cardigan tightly around herself against the evening chill. "She loves the room," she said, standing beside him, "especially the telescope." Alexander smiled. "I remember you telling me once that you used to stargaze with your father. I thought it might be something Olivia and I could share." Eleanor studied his profile in the dim light. "You've changed, Alexander. Truly changed." "Having Olivia in my life has changed everything," Alexander admitted. "I look at the world differently now. I measure success differently." Eleanor nodded, her expression softening. "Parenthood has a way of doing that." "Not just parenthood," Alexander said quietly, turning to face her. "Reconnecting with you has been illuminating. I've missed you, Eleanor. Not just as Olivia's mother, but as the woman I never should have walked away from." Eleanor's breath caught. "Alexander, I'm not asking for anything," he assured her quickly. "I know I lost that right long ago. I just wanted you to know that I recognize what I threw away, and I'm grateful for whatever place you allow me in your lives now." Before Eleanor could respond, Olivia called from inside. "Mom, Dad, come look at this." The word dad still sent a jolt through Alexander every time he heard it, a title he'd done nothing to earn but was working every day to deserve. He and Eleanor shared a look, the moment between them suspended as they returned inside to their daughter. The following morning, as they stood in the Lakeside Academy courtyard saying goodbye to Olivia, Alexander felt a complex mixture of pride and loss. His daughter, confident, brilliant, and kind, despite his absence, was embarking on a new chapter. He had missed so many firsts in her life. This was one he could finally be present for. The campus bustled with activity as other families said their goodbyes. Elegant brick buildings surrounded a central quad where students gathered in excited clusters. Olivia stood before them in her new school uniform, trying to appear composed but unable to hide the nervous excitement in her eyes. "Call us any time," Eleanor reminded Olivia, straightening her blazer unnecessarily, "day or night." "I know, Mom," Olivia said, rolling her eyes, but accepting another hug. When it was Alexander's turn, he found himself at a loss for words. "I'm so proud of you." He finally managed, his voice rough with emotion. "And I'm so grateful that you gave me a chance to know you." Olivia hugged him tightly. "I'm glad too," she whispered. "See you for family weekend next month?" "Nothing could keep me away," Alexander promised. As they watched Olivia walk toward her dormitory, Eleanor slipped her hand into Alexander's. The gesture, small but significant, felt like another beginning. "She's going to be fine," Eleanor said, as much to reassure herself as him. "Better than fine," Alexander agreed. "She's extraordinary, like her mother." The drive back to the city was quiet, both of them processing the milestone they had just experienced. When they reached Eleanor's home, Alexander walked her to the door, preparing to say goodbye. "Would you like to come in for coffee?" Eleanor asked, surprising him. Inside, as Eleanor prepared the coffee, Alexander wandered through the living room, studying the photographs that chronicled Olivia's life, all the moments he had missed. One photo in particular caught his attention. Olivia, at about 7 years old, gap-toothed and beaming, holding up a science fair ribbon. Her first competition win, Eleanor said, handing him a mug. She built a model of the solar system that actually moved, stayed up 3 nights helping her with it. Alexander traced the frame gently. "I wish I had been there." "I used to wish that too," Eleanor admitted, sitting on the couch. "I was so angry with you for so long, Alexander. For choosing your company over us, for missing all these moments." "You had every right to be," he said, joining her. "But watching you with Olivia these past months," she continued, "seeing how completely you've rearranged your life to be present for her, it's helped me let go of that anger." Alexander set down his coffee, turning to face her fully. "Eleanor, I know we've been focused on co-parenting, on making this transition as smooth as possible for Olivia. And that's as it should be, but I need to tell you that my feelings for you never went away. They were just buried under ambition and regret and the walls I built around myself." Eleanor was quiet for a long moment. "I dated, you know," she finally said. "Over the years, nothing ever lasted." Olivia always came first, of course, but that wasn't the only reason. She met his gaze directly. No one ever measured up to what we had, even with all its complications. Hope bloomed in Alexander's chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'm open to the possibility of us finding our way back to each other," Eleanor said carefully. "Not rushing, not picking up where we left off, as if the past 12 years didn't happen, but starting something new, with all the wisdom we've gained and the people we've become." Alexander reached for her hand, his heart fuller than he could ever remember it being. I would like that very much. The weeks that followed took on a new rhythm. With Olivia away at school, Alexander and Eleanor began the delicate process of rediscovering each other. They started with dinner once a week, then twice. They attended lectures at the Science Museum, walked through the botanical gardens on Sunday afternoons, shared books they had loved over the years they were apart. I never thought I'd see Alexander reading a novel for pleasure. Eleanor teased one evening as they sat in her living room, Alexander engrossed in a book she had recommended. He looked up with a smile. There are a lot of things I never thought I'd do again. Like this. He leaned over and kissed her softly, still marveling that he was allowed this privilege once more. Their relationship developed slowly, deliberately. Both of them aware of the stakes. They agreed not to tell Olivia until they were certain of their path forward, not wanting to give her false hope or complicate her adjustment to boarding school. But Olivia, perceptive as always, noticed the change during her first weekend home. Something's different, she announced over breakfast, looking between them suspiciously. You two are being weird. Weird how? Eleanor asked, attempting innocence. I don't know. You keep looking at each other when you think I'm not watching. And Dad brought flowers. She pointed to the arrangement on the counter. He never brings flowers. Alexander and Eleanor exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between them. Your mother and I have been spending some time together, Alexander admitted, getting to know each other again. Olivia's eyes widened. Like dating? Something like that. Eleanor said, her cheeks flushing slightly. A slow smile spread across Olivia's face. It's about time. I was starting to think I'd have to lock you two in a room together. You're okay with this? Alexander asked cautiously. Duh, Olivia replied, returning to her cereal. I've been hoping for it since you showed up at that cafe. Alexander gave a small laugh of disbelief. And here we were, trying to be subtle for your sake. Olivia rolled her eyes. Parents are so clueless sometimes. With Olivia's blessing, Alexander and Eleanor allowed their relationship to deepen. They still maintained separate residences, both agreeing that rushing into cohabitation would be a mistake. But Alexander found himself spending more evenings at Eleanor's home than at his penthouse, and more mornings waking up beside her. The change in his personal life inevitably affected his professional one. Alexander had already begun delegating more responsibilities at Horizon, but now he took more decisive steps to restructure the company's leadership. 6 months after dropping Olivia at Lakeside, Alexander stood in his office at Horizon Innovations, packing the personal items from his desk into a box. The door opened, and Gregory Winters entered, looking concerned. The board is in an uproar, the older man said without preamble. This restructuring plan of yours, stepping down as CEO to become chairman, promoting Vanessa to chief executive, it's unprecedented. Alexander continued packing calmly. Vanessa has been running most of the day-to-day operations for months now. She's more than ready, and I'll still be involved in major strategic decisions. But why? Gregory pressed. You built this company from nothing. It's your life's work. Alexander smiled, picking up a new photograph from his desk himself, Eleanor, and Olivia at Lakeside's family weekend, all three smiling broadly. That's where you're wrong, Gregory. This company is what I do, not who I am. Not anymore. As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Olivia's flight lands at 4. Dinner reservations at 7. Don't be late. Alexander showed the message to Gregory. My daughter is coming home for spring break. We're taking her to that new restaurant she's been wanting to try, and tomorrow we're visiting the Science Museum's new exhibit on renewable energy. That's more important than any board meeting. Gregory studied him for a long moment, then shook his head with a bemused smile. I never thought I'd see the day when Alexander Reed prioritized family dinner over business. Neither did I, Alexander admitted, placing the photograph carefully in his box, but it turns out that success looks different than I thought it did. Alexander gave up billions to feel alive again. What would you give up? Subscribe before life forces that question on you. Those who don't, they'll be typing excuses in the comments while time slips away. As he left the building that had been the center of his universe for so long, Alexander felt none of the emptiness that had once plagued him. Instead, he felt a sense of purpose and fulfillment that no business achievement had ever provided. At the airport, he spotted Eleanor waiting near the arrivals gate, her face lighting up when she saw him. They had been taking things slowly, rebuilding their relationship with careful intention, but the love between them was undeniable, deeper now for having weathered separation and reunion. Has her flight landed? He asked, joining Eleanor. Just taxiing to the gate now, she replied, slipping her hand into his, with the easy familiarity they had rediscovered. As they waited for Olivia to appear, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought him here. 12 years ago, he had made a choice that cost him his family. He had built an empire of glass and steel, accumulated wealth beyond imagination, and achieved every professional goal he had set for himself, and none of it had filled the void inside him. Now, watching his daughter emerge from the gate, her face breaking into a wide smile when she spotted them, Alexander knew with absolute certainty that he had finally found true success not in the company he had built, but in the family he was rebuilding. One day at a time. Olivia rushed toward them, enveloping them both in a hug. "I have so much to tell you," she exclaimed. "My robotics team qualified for nationals, and my chemistry professor wants me to assist with his research project next term." And Alexander exchanged a glance with Eleanor over their daughter's head, both of them smiling at her enthusiasm. This was what mattered. This was everything. The summer after Olivia's first year at Lakeside brought another significant change. Alexander had purchased a house halfway between the city and the school, a sprawling property with gardens Eleanor loved, and a dedicated workshop where Olivia could tinker with her robotics projects. It was to be their family home, though they hadn't yet decided when to make the move official. "What do you think?" Alexander asked as they walked through the empty rooms, their footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors. "Too much? Not enough?" Eleanor squeezed his hand. "It's perfect, but are you sure you're ready to leave the penthouse? That's been your home for so long." "It was never a home," Alexander replied. "Just a place to sleep between workdays. This," he gestured around them, "this could be a home. The three of us together." They were standing on the back porch, overlooking the gardens, when Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Eleanor's eyes widened as he opened it, revealing a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm not asking because of Olivia, or because it's the logical next step," Alexander said softly. "I'm asking because I love you, Eleanor. I always have. And I want to spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Are you sure? Your life has changed so much in the past year." "For the better," Alexander insisted. "You and Olivia are the best things that ever happened to me. I was just too blind to see it before." Eleanor took the ring from the box, studying it in the afternoon light. "It's not the same one," she observed. "No," Alexander agreed. "We're not the same people we were 12 years ago. This is a new beginning, not a do-over." Eleanor slipped the ring onto her finger, then reached up to cup his face in her hands. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, to a new beginning." They decided to tell Olivia together that evening over dinner. Her reaction was everything they could have hoped for, a squeal of delight followed by a barrage of questions about the wedding. "Can I be your maid of honor?" she asked Eleanor. "Or wait, maybe I should be Dad's best man. Is that a thing? A best daughter?" Alexander laughed, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "You can be whatever you want to be. This is as much your day as ours." Later that night, after Olivia had gone to bed, Alexander and Eleanor sat on the porch swing at Eleanor's house, soon to be their former house, once the new place was ready. "I never thought we'd end up here," Eleanor admitted, her head resting on his shoulder. "When you walked into my office that day, asking about Olivia, I was so angry, so determined to keep you at arm's length." "You had every right to be," Alexander said. "I abandoned you both. But you came back," Eleanor said, looking up at him. "That's what matters. You came back, and you stayed. And you proved that people can change." "Not everyone," Alexander said thoughtfully. "It takes a certain kind of wake-up call. For me, it was seeing Olivia's photo, realizing what I'd missed. But I was already questioning my choices, feeling the emptiness of success without meaning." "Do you ever regret it?" Eleanor asked. "The years you spent building Horizon instead of being with us?" Alexander considered the question carefully. "I regret the pain I caused you both. I regret missing Olivia's childhood. But I don't regret building something that's changing the world for the better. I just wish I'd found a way to do both." Eleanor nodded. "That's what we're teaching Olivia, isn't it? That you don't have to choose between ambition and love. That the right partner supports your dreams instead of competing with them." "The right partner," Alexander repeated, pulling her closer. "That's what you've always been for me, even when I was too foolish to see it." The wedding was a small, intimate affair held in the garden of their new home. Olivia, as it turned out, served as both maid of honor and best daughter, proudly standing between them as they exchanged vows. Gregory Winters attended, along with a handful of close friends and colleagues who had supported them through the years. As Alexander slipped the wedding band onto Eleanor's finger, he made a silent vow that went beyond the official ones he'd just spoken. He vowed to never again mistake achievement for fulfillment, to never prioritize success over the people who made that success meaningful. The years that followed brought challenges, of course. Olivia's transition to college MIT, following in both her parents' footsteps, tested their newly formed family unit. Alexander's reduced role at Horizon occasionally created tensions when critical decisions needed to be made. Eleanor's decision to step back from Westridge Technologies entirely to focus on nonprofit work supporting women in STEM fields meant adjustments to their lifestyle. But through it all, they faced each challenge together, their bond strengthened by the knowledge of what they had almost lost forever. On Olivia's graduation day, as they watched her accept her diploma with highest honors, Eleanor leaned close to Alexander and whispered, "We did it. Despite everything, we did it." Alexander squeezed her hand, his throat tight with emotion. "She did it," he corrected gently. "We just had the privilege of watching." Later, at the celebration dinner, Olivia raised her glass in a toast. "To my parents," she said, her voice steady but her eyes shining with unshed tears, "who taught me that it's never too late to fix your mistakes, that love is worth fighting for, and that true success isn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the lives you touch and the difference you make." Alexander looked around the table at his family, at Eleanor, who had found the strength to forgive him, at Olivia, who had given him a second chance he hadn't deserved, at the life they had built together from the ashes of his greatest mistake, and knew with absolute certainty that he was the richest man in the world. Not because of the billions in his bank account or the global company that bore his name, but because he had been given the rarest gift of all, the opportunity to redeem himself, to rebuild what he had broken, to discover that the true measure of a man isn't in what he accomplishes, but in who he loves and how well he loves them. As the evening wound down, Alexander found himself alone with Olivia for a moment on the restaurant's terrace. "I'm proud of you, Dad," she said, the title still sending a thrill through him even after all these years. "I'm the one who's proud," Alexander replied. "You're extraordinary, Olivia. Everything I could have hoped for in a daughter and more." She smiled, then grew serious. "Can I ask you something? Something I've always wondered but never asked?" "Anything. Okay. Do you ever regret finding out about me? Your life would have been so different if you hadn't seen that news alert." Alexander was stunned by the question. "Regret finding you? Olivia, discovering you existed was the best thing that ever happened to me. Before you, I had achievement without meaning, success without joy. You and your mother taught me what really matters." Olivia nodded, satisfied with his answer. "That's what I thought, but I needed to hear you say it." As they rejoined Eleanor inside, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought them here, from the empty corner office on the 87th floor to this moment of genuine connection and joy. From hollow success to meaningful fulfillment. From absence to presence.